Welcome to the Student Athlete Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Lemke. Guys, I'm really excited about this guest today. This guy has competed at the highest levels of his sport, like many of you want to do. His name is Joshua Tibatemwa. Hopefully I pronounced that right. He's a former swimmer who represented Uganda at the 2016 Summer Olympics in Brazil and has competed worldwide as well. But not only that, this guy is becoming like a brother to me. I've really got to know Josh over the last couple of years, and I really look up to him in many ways for his wisdom and his just perspective on a lot of things in life. And I know by the end of this episode, you guys are going to get a lot of good stuff from him as well. That you guys can start implementing into your own routines so that you can compete at the highest level of your sport. Just to be real, guys, this is probably the first time that he's talked publicly about this. So you guys are kind of getting first line insights into Josh and what it really took for him to become an Olympian. Because I didn't even know he was an Olympian or had been an Olympian until about a year after knowing him. So today we're going to talk about identity of an athlete, Josh's journey to the Olympics and what it required, and all of the preparation that was required to compete at the highest level of his sport. Josh, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Nick. And you were really close, actually. It's very rare that people get Tibatemwa that close, especially Americans. But I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, I listened to our retry, our original recording, and I practiced it. All right, so let's get into what. Let's just talk about your journey to the Olympics. Like, what did that look like? Like, actually, if we even fast forward to that kind of time frame leading up to the Olympics, what did that look like to you?
Yeah, and you can make it all dramatic, like one of those sports movies where, like, I'm on the blocks and I'm thinking back to and I thought back to how it all began. So yeah, I grew up Kampala, Uganda, born and raised. I have two brothers. And actually, I got into swimming because of my older brother. He started swimming first, and then trade secret. I was a little bit of a chubby kid, and I hated being in the soccer locker rooms because those are really packed. It's a really popular sport in Uganda and running. So I was like, what locker room is empty? And nobody wanted to be in the swim locker room. So I was like, all right, I'll just start swimming. Um, so that's sort of just how I started. I did it as like it was a low key. Everybody else during PE would go play soccer or run, and I'd go swim. Um, and very quickly, one of the coaches who was just randomly watching me said, "This you're kind of good. You're kind of good." And one of my earliest memories was everybody in class was still like in the kiddie pool. This was when I was like 6 or 5, and I was already in like the big pool doing laps, and it was like I felt excited for swim class because I was like, "Ha ha ha! Watch this!" By everybody in the kiddie pool. But I think it really got serious when I got to high school. I joined like a competitive team. We started doing traveling. We traveled mostly around Africa to begin with, because you sort of just increase in scope. So started with Kenya next door, and then I did Malawi, I did Botswana, and then South Africa, which is sort of the swimming powerhouse of Africa. And then yeah, after I had done the South African competition, I specifically moved to a school in Kenya that was really good at swimming and academics, because that's something we'll talk about later. My parents never let me drop my academic performance just because I was swimming. And from then on, started doing competitions in Europe mainly, the World Championships. And after a couple of World Championships, I landed at Rio 2016. So it's a part of the movie where, the screen fades back and I'm on the blocks.
That's good. I like that. I like that. When did you decide you wanted to compete in the Olympics? Like, what were some key things that you did? Because you mentioned how you became a swimmer, but what led to you actually wanting to be an Olympian?
Yeah. And it's an interesting story because I won't lie and say that I always wanted to be an Olympian. I think I remember the exact moment where I decided that was what I wanted, was actually someone who I swam with. She was very talented. She was so talented actually that her dad like she got a scholarship to a school in the UK and she started swimming there. I think it's Plymouth College. They're pretty well known. But this is like high school. And she did the 2012 Olympics. And I remember we were watching the opening ceremony and I saw her coming with the Uganda team on the opening ceremony. And I remember that was a moment for me where I was like, I want to be there. I want to do that. And I had been competing actually up until that point. I hadn't yet done a world championship, but I had done the regional challenges in Africa. But it's just the thought of someone who I had grown up with, someone who I knew was there with all the people who I looked up to with the athletes. And that's sort of what sparked the I want to be there.
I like that. So what were some of those early things that you realized you needed to start doing differently, going from just swimming to I want to be an Olympics?
Yeah. Very quickly, even when I was just doing the regional competitions, most people who will listen to this will understand is that being casual and being serious, whether or not you're going to the Olympics, is like a vast gap. You can have all the talent. Um, it was very quickly when I saw the kind of dedication it took for other swimmers. Like when I first did my trip to South Africa and I was, on the blocks with some of these guys and just like hearing the kind of training they did really sort of made me realize like I needed to up my game. And that's actually why for my last 2 years of school, I went to school in Kenya. There's a school called the Aga Khan Academy in Mombasa, and it's really, really prestigious, really great academics. But one thing I liked is they said they also have like a really competitive swim program. And the way it worked is you'd train in the morning, you'd get like 30 minutes. It was a boarding school. You get 30 minutes, you go, you do your breakfast, you shower, and then you go straight to class. And after class, you have another swim session. So um, I had done 2-a-days before, but I had done 2-a-days usually during the summer break just because, it was crazy. And I was like, oh, I want to go to an environment where I can sort of build my day and structure my day as optimum as possible. And there's some trade-offs of being in boarding school. You're away from your family, but one thing it does well is like everything you need is just like in walking distance. Your class, your swimming pool, your gym, they're all right there. So I think that was the big shift when I said I do want to go to boarding school in Mombasa, and that's where for like 2 years. And this was post one of the world championships I had done. It was just 2 years of swim, study, swim, study, swim, study.
Okay. So then what about as we got into closer to the Olympics, what did that look like? What are your training? I know we talked nutrition a little bit last time we chatted. What did that kind of stuff look like?
Yeah. So post Kenya, I realized that I wanted to keep swimming in college because that would be the best chance I have. I was like, well, if I do actually want to go for it, I'm going to have to go to like an institution of higher learning that has a great swim program. Um, and there's no place for sports like the US of A. There's some options in South Africa that were pretty good, but in terms of academics and sports, the USA has this really interesting symmetry between the two. I also looked at a couple of schools in the UK, but a friend of mine, actually, another friend who I swam with and grew up with, and he had done the Junior Olympics. And he was in the USA at the time, and he recommended I join a little college in the middle of Iowa called Grinnell College. Um, and what I really liked about Grinnell was they were known for their academics, but also they had a really strong swim program. He told me like it was D3, so academics would always be important, but they had the sort of same setup where it's like swim in the morning, go to class, train in the evening, or lift in the morning, go to class, swim in the evening. I was also a sprinter, so as I got, closer, the lifting aspect actually became more important, and it went from 2 swims a day to one lift, one swim a day. And Grinnell, you guys should look this up. It's in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, but it has some of the best facilities you will ever see. It's actually kind of jarring because you go from like, what the heck is this doing here? Like this 50-meter pool with like a movable bulkhead so it could change size. We had a diving well. We had like an entire like lifting complex just for the athletes. And that was sort of my big bet was like joining this college team would be the thing that sort of finally got me to that level. And funny story is, I actually told my coach when I applied, I was like, hey, I'm gonna try and do this thing. I think I have a shot at making it on the Olympic team for Uganda, but please don't tell anyone. I don't want anyone to know. Let this just be between you and me. And she was like, yeah, um, come join us. We'll do everything we can to get you ready.
I gotta ask about that because I know when we talked initially, you were talking about you were initially a little bit more quiet about your desire to compete in the Olympics. So can we talk about that? Because we talk about affirmations, and this is something that athletes, you guys really need to understand. Like what you tell yourself is ultimately what's most likely to happen. So yeah, can you talk about that?
Yeah, yeah. So like I said, I'm a guy who grew up in Kampala, Uganda. We're not exactly known for our swimming prowess. I actually remember in school, a teacher once told me to get my head out of water. Literally, he was like, "Dude, like Ugandans aren't swimmers. Like, go run or do something where you have a better chance." But I don't know. I just internally, I knew that I whispered it to myself that this is something I want, and I think I decided that it doesn't really matter if other people know or other people for me. This is gonna be my little nugget that I take out and just like look at it and like whisper it quietly. I'm gonna go to the Olympics one day, and then put it back in, and it was sort of my just intrinsic driver. And yeah, and I'm not saying I didn't have support. My parents were super supportive of my swimming. I think I just didn't let them into that little piece. It was almost like this is my little nugget, and this one's for me. I'm gonna do this for me. All the other swimming and stuff, I was grateful. I let people know goals, whether it be times, but going to Rio was something I kept close to my chest for a long time.
Like that. I mean, that's one of those things where athletes like you may have supportive parents, you may not have supportive parents. And so like sometimes, whether they're supportive or not, you may have to be a little bit private about those things, but also as we'll get into, I know Josh will share is like also having people who do believe in you and want to help you succeed in that is also helpful as well. And so I do want to get into the identity piece of this. So I know, Josh, this was a topic you really wanted to get into for the athletes. And so, a lot of them struggle with making, or I wouldn't say struggle, a lot of young athletes make sport their whole identity. Some of them do it because they love their sport, and some of them do it because they love their parents. So can you talk about this a little bit more, especially with your own journey?
Yeah, there's a little duality here because, like I said, my parents were always supportive, but they were the stereotypical African parents where school always came first. And it actually irritated me a little bit when I was younger. I was like, why is this so important? But it helped that my parents forced me to have sort of a broader view of myself beyond just the swimming identity. Like it was going great, but they're like, but don't forget, I want some A's, right? I remember, man, my little brother had a joke about how if I came home and there were 10 grades and there were 9 A's and one B, my parents and I were going to talk about that one B. Like that was the sort of the way it ran in my household. It's like I was like, what about the other nine? Um, but to be honest with you, I won't lie. I did find myself, and upon reflection, it's easy to say, a lot of my identity was wrapped up in swimming. As a teenager, as a young adult, we're all sort of trying to find ourselves, find our footing. And as I started to get better and better at swimming and start to be known as the swimmer, you sort of feed into it, right? Like it's an easy place. You get a lot of kudos. People are always impressed by you, always saying you great. And so what ends up happening is swimming went from a thing I did that made me happy to who I was. And I know all these dramatic movies will tell you that that's a good thing, but I want to be honest with you. That's something you have to you have to be very cautious about that. Um, One of my close friends once told me about this movie. I haven't actually watched it, Chariots of Fire, where there's like that one runner who says, "Oh, I run because God made me fast and I enjoy it. I do it for the thrill. I love running." And then the other person said, "When that gun goes off, I have 9 seconds to prove my existence." And where you fall on that sort of spectrum kind of tells you how you view your sport and you're at whatever activity, could be sport, could be your job, but I won't lie, for a while there, swimming lost its joy. It became about validating who I was. Like, I was a swimmer, I could not fail. And that led me to sort of holding so tight that I don't know. I think, whatever activity you do, it should be fun. You should enjoy it. And when it becomes so wrapped up in who you are that, one day you have a bad training session and like the whole day is ruined. Like, I didn't meet my goal for the day, and you're just walking through angry and frustrated. Your mom asks you something, you're like, you know, that's something you have to watch out for and check yourself. And I'm not just saying this because, it's something you can say in retrospect. I actually think it helps you if you're able to take a broader view of who you are and have a more holistic image. Because things do happen in life, you know, and a lot of times people say that the caution comes is like, what if this doesn't work out? I actually like to point the direction of like, what if it does work out? What if you do make your goals? And that's all you think you are, right? Like, I am this thing. You miss out a lot on a lot of the things that life has to offer if what you do is the only way you characterize yourself.
Yeah, I like that. So what would be some signs that their identity is getting too wrapped up into just the one thing?
Rather than give you a little bullet pointed list, I'm going to give you examples of things in my life and stories I tell when I talk about how I knew something was kind of off. I remember when I was in that high school in Kenya, I had this really close friend, and they were having a really hard day. And this was my best friend. Um, and one day they just came and they're literally crying, right? Telling me about something that's really difficult for them to share. And we're talking and we're talking. And then I look at the time and it's like, oh, swimming starts in 5 minutes. And I'm kind of ashamed to say I told them, hey, can we put a pause on this? I have swim practice. And most people will be like, yeah, of course. You wanted to go to the Olympics, you had swim practice. Um, this was one of the most important relationships in my life. This person, I love this person. They love me. We relied on each other. And I told them that right now your feelings need to be put on pause because I have to go do what is actually important. I tell this story not to shame anyone and make them feel like if you do that, you're a bad person or you don't care about people. But I think that's when you start to ask yourself, like, what has the most value to me? Could I have stayed and been 10 minutes late to practice as long as I was there for that person, right? And maybe I would have missed some practice, maybe. But, you need to ask yourself that question and not immediately go, it's fine. People will always be emotional. That's true. People will always be emotional, but they're also the same people who pick you up when things go wrong. They're also the people who will be there to celebrate with you when things go right. I think the way you treat other people is a big indicator, especially when whatever it is they're seeking comes in conflict with your goal. Just check in with yourself and be like, "Ooh, what's going on here?"
Hmm.
Um, Another, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, is the kind of joy you take from the activity. When the activity stops being about joy and more about proving your existence, that's a big sign to check in with yourself. Whether it be you get injured and like coach tells you to sit out and you decide you're going to hide your injury, or you just don't feel it and you can't even cope with the fact that I'm not feeling it today. Those are usually signs that something else is happening there, and you're turning your sport, your activity into your identity.
I like that. So you talk about the fun piece. With the fun piece, you have an experience from after the Olympics of how you started separating yourself a little bit more from the sport, but still enjoying the sport. How Tell us about that, and then how you would recommend athletes implement that even.
Yeah. I think it actually started from the Olympics. I was actually lucky enough to be selected to also be the flag bearer for my country. And that was by surprise. It came out of nowhere. It was like 2 days before the head of our delegation, Olympic delegation, walks in and is like, hey, come here. I got to ask you something. Do you think you could carry the flag? And I was like, do I think I could carry the flag? Yes, I could carry the flag. And I was happy actually in that moment. I was terrified. I was scared. I thought I'd trip. I was like, okay, Joshua, you know how to walk. Like, all you gotta do is walk and swing. Walk and swing. It's not that complicated. But then I contrast it with the day I was on the blocks and I was gonna swim my race, and it felt different. It just felt different. There are no words I can put to it. And I remember when I finished swimming, it went so quick. I'm a 50 freestyler, sprinter, and I was kind of like, hmm, that's it. I didn't feel the elation I thought I would feel. Neither did I feel like super disappointed that I didn't win a medal or that I didn't swim as fast. The time was fine. It felt very hollow. Truthfully, there was no joy in it. And I remember walking around for like a day thinking like what was this all for? Like what next? I'd spent all these years head down thinking that if I got this thing, kind of like I said from the movie, I would have proved my existence, right? Um, and then, in a strange twist of fate, the next year I actually got injured pretty badly. Um, and that was really difficult for me because now more than ever I identified with my sport. I was a swimmer. I was walking around the campus knowing I'm the Olympic swimmer, guys, right? And then I couldn't swim. And I don't mean I got injured in a way that I could push through. I tried to. I remember trying to push through practice and having to get out of the pool. And my coach actually told me, hey, buddy, this is not working. What happened is I hurt my back and I triggered sciatica basically. I had inflammation in my lower back that was pinching the nerve. So I basically could only swim for a few minutes. And I remember breaking down because I had to sort of give up on that season, right? There were going to be no personal bests. There were going to be no records broken. Yeah, it was tough. It was genuinely one of the toughest times in my life, and having to reorient myself and realize that like I had put so much stock into being the swimmer, and now that that was gone, I didn't know what to do. Um, but luckily, and this is where I go back to how your relationships are the most important thing in your life. My parents had always made me think of myself as more than just an athlete. This goes to the academics thing, but in general, everything else as well. So I had actually joined the school. I thought I was going to be a petroleum engineer, but I didn't really enjoy chemistry and physics. Like I did fine, but I just found it boring as heck. But then I found computer science, and I was like, oh my god, I actually enjoy this. And call it fate, call it God's grace, call it charisma. I don't know. I got an internship that summer at like a big tech company, and that really helped. Because usually in the summer I was used to competing at world champs, and that was gone. So I sort of threw myself into like the software engineering side of things, and I enjoyed it. I was like, I found the joy there that I realized I had lost in swimming. And so for my final year of college, I remember telling myself, I'm going to enjoy my last year of swimming. I am just going to swim. This is my last hurrah. I'm just going to swim and enjoy it and try and find the happiness again. Um, and that was great. That was I think I had the most fun my senior year swimming that I did ever since like I was a kid, right? Because once I wanted to go to the Olympics, it was serious. Like I've done it, I've done the thing. Time to enjoy.
So, what then with that would you recommend for the athletes who are maybe feeling even burnout even before they reach their goal or their mark? Like, how could they implement that into what they're doing?
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant question because I ask myself that all the time because I still had a year. I could have stopped swimming. Like I had done everything I wanted to, and it was like senior year. Um, I did it because I wanted to. I started to think of it as like this is not who I am, and I know that's easier said than done, especially when you're in the thick of it. But just like also being surrounded with people and letting yourself just be honestly be loved for who you are and know what you do, right? Just hanging out with more people, talking with the other swimmers, and not having everything be so hyper focused on did I medal? Did I get the goal? You can still have the goal, but I think finding joy in the little things is really like the easiest way. Like if you have a good swim practice, accept that you had a good swim practice or whatever practice it would be. If you had a tough one, just be like, well, I had a tough day today. That doesn't mean the world is falling apart. That doesn't mean I'm not going to make my goal. Because you will, and every athlete will tell you this. Every person who has a goal will tell you this. the movies are corny for a reason. You know how a movie, it's always like things are great and then there's this big cliff and it feels terrible, but you get back up. Because that's life in a nutshell. That's every day. That can happen within a day. It can happen within a week. It can happen within a season. It's just always remembering that, like, to take joy in the little moments, relationships, and having, yeah, and actually looking to have fun again. Like, make that a goal for yourself. Like, whether it be a practice, and let's say, swimming has the 4 strokes. Is there a stroke you find just randomly fun and you don't do because you don't compete in it? Swim a little more of it just for the heck of it. You know, I so I'm mostly breaststroke and freestyle, but I remember my senior year, I was like, yeah, I'll just swim backstroke sometimes, swim some butterfly. I raced. I remember I had a bet with my coach. Again, I'm a sprinter here, and for those of you who know, I said I'm just gonna swim the 200 butterfly this year, just one race. I told him one race I will swim the 200 butterfly because we had like a charity event. It was brutal. It was painful, but it was just fun, and everybody who saw me swim it was laughing because like, oh my god, is he actually gonna finish the race? And I was like, I don't know, but I'm gonna do it.
One, and for the like team sport athletes where it's like baseball, football, basketball, a simple similarity for that. If you're right-handed, shoot left-handed. If you're
Yeah,
left-handed, shoot right-handed. Like simple, like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
That can make it more fun and chill.
Right? Yeah, it's gonna be terrible, but there's something funny about the fact that you're intentionally choosing to do it badly, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So if you were a high schooler again, would you do it again?
Honestly, yes. Yeah, I would. I think so much of who I am as a person was shaped by that experience. I know we could go all doom and gloom, or we could go all happy and happy, but I just think that like the real value of it was, yes, I made it to the Olympics, but I think just learning to have a goal, setting it and seeing it happen, working towards something, dreaming big. It, I think I said this last time. It's just like in life, sometimes you have to just be a hopeless optimist. It's just like you just have to be hopelessly optimistic. You just have to have like a crazy dream and hold on to it and try. So that, because I do think, like, if you think about popular discourse, everything is kind of bleak. Everything is going wrong, and that can be hard. And I think sports or whatever goal it is you have can be a space where you allow yourself to dream big. And like, yes, I did make it to the Olympics, but perhaps, maybe even a little whisper was like, maybe get a medal. That didn't happen, right? I did not medal. But that's okay, right? Like, it was okay to have that dream because it brought me joy to have that dream, to imagine myself on the podium. And I remember it's a pretty famous phrase, right? Shoot for the stars, land on the moon. It'll still be great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, again, it's a lot of athletes are setting these small goals. They're like, yeah, I just want to play in college or, whatever. It's like, just go for D1. If you don't make D1, cool, but you still made your original goal of making college. Like, just do it.
Yeah.
One of my guys, I even tell him, I'm like, hey, like, why don't we just say, hey, let's try to get drafted out of high school, like as a baseball player, just,
This guy.
yeah. Any tips you have for athletes to kind of wrap up, like any key things you want to highlight for the athletes out there?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and we've kind of talked about this a lot, is as an athlete, and we go back to identity, thinking about your physical identity also. It's a discussion of performance versus aesthetics. So, like as a swimmer, you're shirtless in speedos all the time, right? And so there's always this. You get to see what everybody else looks like, and you get to make these comparisons, especially if you're like performance focused. You're like, oh, that person's faster than me, and they look this way. So to be fast, I must look this way. That's usually like a clear line, right? But I think you will find that knowing your own requirements, whether it be your own physical requirements, mental requirements, emotional requirements, is actually the way to go. Understanding that, like, yeah, you could be the most cut person on planet Earth, right? Six pack and everything, Cristiano Ronaldo, and not swim fast. Or you could, or the two could be linked. I just think that one of the things I'd recommend athletes do is, like, while you're doing this identity, sort of this exploration of your identity and your sport, is to also make sure that have you somehow also mixed up performance and aesthetics. And this is not me bashing on people who want aesthetic. Go get the six pack if you want to. Just understand that the six pack may not be what you need for your sport. Um, and you do need to fuel yourself correctly. You do need to understand what you need to do in terms of, I mean, Nick is here, obviously. How you need to eat. You need to eat. You need to fuel yourself. And that goes again to the identity piece, your psyche, whether it be taking time to just like take a break from your sport and like, I know a lot of people journal, a lot of people meditate. Feed yourself in more holistic ways than just the food that goes into your body, while also making sure you put good food into your body.
Any other things around even the mental piece of it, or you mentioned like community before, like what are, or even like the visualization, there's a lot of things you kind of
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, but just as in like summary too.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I'm talking about community so much is Nick here is part of my community. And I know maybe it doesn't seem like there's a direct correlation, right? Like, why do I need somebody else? Especially if you're in an individual sport, right? Like if you're a track runner or a swimmer, where it's just me in the pool and maybe I have a relay or two, but really it's my performance. I just don't think human beings are built that way. I think you'll be surprised how well you develop when you do have like great community around you. And I know you can make it on your own, but do you have to? I know we love these, especially if you're young, there are all these young lone wolf memes or whatever going around. They're like, no, dude, don't. Like, you don't need that. You don't need to convince yourself that you have to go it alone. You don't. And I'm telling you this, whatever, take it, this, if you can remember one thing, you don't have to go it alone. And you may not necessarily be able to lean on everyone in the way you want to, but it's okay to explore ways you want to lean on people, you know.
I like that. I mean, it makes it a lot harder when you do it alone too. Like when you do it alone, it requires a lot more from you, which makes it less likely that you're actually going to reach the goal. So
Yeah.
think about it, like how badly do you want it?
Yeah. And even still, it's like advice, right? Like you could have one person giving you advice, or you could have 10 people giving you advice, right? Like one thing I like to say is you don't have to follow all the advice you're given, but the more advice you have, the more likely one of them is correct. If you're leaning on a single person, just I hope you picked a high quality person, right? I hope
Yeah.
this one person can encapsulate everything on your planet. And even like that's why the highest performing athletes have a squad around them. Whenever if you listen to the ESPYs, or let's use the Oscars for more because more people watch the Oscars, right? When people go up to receive an award, everyone's always like, why are you thanking 30 people? Well, it's because the people who perform well recognize that they needed the 30 people to get there. Um, I always find it funny that, actors are like, and my publicist and like, my agent, and it's funny, it's memed all the time. But it is important to have high quality people around you because just like as Nick said, they're just things that it's easier to like take off your shoulders so that you do get to perform, you know, to your very best. You could just focus on the performance. You don't have to focus on all these other little things that are sort of like administrative tasks.
Yeah, that's good. So in terms of people to reach out to learn from, to grow from, I know you're more of a private guy, Josh, but where can listeners reach out to you?
Yeah. Well, I am private, but since I'm here, you can reach out to me at joshuatibatemwa@gmail.com. I know Nick will probably have it in the notes, but it's also like a challenge. See if you can type out my name without looking at his notes. And yeah, just if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably in a great place because you recognize the need for a team, right? Nick is a dietitian. I'm not saying everybody needs a dietitian, but it's a great thing to have, lean on your coach, there may be people who do like, this is funny. Your mom may go for yoga in the mornings. Go with your mom for yoga. Stretching is just like one of these like low key hacks. I think I make this joke because like as a sprinter, I was one of the stiffest people on planet Earth. And then I discovered yoga, and I was like, oh my God, I wish I had discovered this like 30 years ago.
Josh, thank you so much for that. Again, this is something athletes, like listeners, really build that team around you, build those people. It doesn't mean you have to pay every single person that's around you, but you got to have people around you. You don't have to spend $1 million like LeBron or whatever, but still have people around you, friends, teammates, other athletes, other people family who are going to support you through that journey. And really, again, just like Josh is saying, make sure that your whole identity isn't just your sport. Like, make sure there's other pieces of the identity, because if that identity or if that piece kind of breaks in some way or it kind of gets damaged, then your entire everything falls apart. So make sure you guys really lean into that. Josh, again, thank you for sharing your journey, your wisdom, opening up with everybody about this. I know this is a big step, a big new thing. So again, I appreciate it. But for listeners, again, until next time, keep striving for greatness.